everyone, welcome back to Flying Solo with Kat. And today, of course, as I promised last week, we are going to talk about the Book of Boba Fett. I am so excited. I've been putting this video off just a tiny bit, mainly because I had to rewatch Book of Boba Fett because I wanted to make sure I was talking about the right thing. And I knew which, because I'm probably going to go by episode, just so it's easier for you guys to kind of follow along and I could talk about my thoughts on each episode. And then at the end, I'll talk about this, series as a whole. Book of Boba Fett was my favorite Star Wars TV show from the Disney era. It is now in second place, just behind Ahsoka. Ahsoka, unfortunately, took the title of my favorite TV show out of it's almost my favorite TV show that they have put out for Star Wars. Book of Boba Fett is a beautiful mess and I love it. Book of Boba Fett came out in 2021 around that time, so I was just kind of getting into Star Wars. As y'all know, I kind of started in 2020. So, Book of Boba Fett, I was like, oh, dude, I love Boba Fett. I would love to know more about him. But I didn't have a strong connection with the character. And a lot of people are so confused by that because one of my favorite characters is Boba Fett. And I have a whole collection of him. I've done paintings of Boba Fett. Just the entire... I have Boba Fett's helmet, the Black Series helmet, which is one of my favorites. And people get confused, well, like, why? And I'm just like, because he's so freaking cool. But with this show, I was actually able to explain why I like him as a character, his connections to the Tuskens, him wanting to rule by respect instead of fear, and of course the whole clone thing with Jango, and he's just a freaking cool bounty hunter. So with this show, I was honestly happy with anything that we got, because we get more Book of Boba Fett. We get more Boba Fett as a character, but what was introduced in this show, I was really surprised by, Boba Fett wise. Where this show tends to fail is with the introduction of certain characters that have nothing to do with Boba Fett. So if you've not seen Book of Boba Fett, go watch it, please. I promise you'll have a great time. And it's directed by Robert Rodriguez, who's done a lot of wacky, crazy movies. So you're in for a good time. And just kind of, it's a good show. I hate saying this because it's not in a bad way, but it's a good show to just shut your brain off and just watch. And it's enjoyable. So, yeah, this is going to be a heavily spoiler review, but sit back, relax, and enjoy. So, again, I'm going to go episode by episode. So, episode 1, we basically start with the flashback to the Sarlacc. We get flashbacks with Tuskens. And then we see Fennec and Boba on the throne. So the whole thing with the Sarlacc, for some reason people were really mad. If you all have seen the Parks and Recreation clip with, I know who that actor is, but I also don't remember his name. Just search up Book of Boba Fett Parks and Recreation, and you'll see this amazing scene. And basically, there's this guy at the council pitching his next Star Wars, so what would have been Force Awakens. And basically, he says Boba Fett reaches out of the Sarlacc pit with his hand and whatever. And it is almost a one-for-one shot of what actually happens in the show. So I immediately seeing that, I thought Parks and Recreation, because that's one of my favorite TV shows. But actually having that be something that Boba does, he survives the Sarlacc. I don't mind. I mean, we knew he was gonna be alive because we saw him in Mando season 2, right? Which of course takes place after Return of the Jedi. So when it came to how he survived, yeah, I don't mind him surviving in a Sarlacc pit. He's a clone. Is he the first clone? Yeah, he's the first clone. And yeah, him surviving, I'm not too shocked about. It even in this show, they make it so kind of important that he still needs to be housed in Bacta because the Sarlacc has taken so much from him, and it's even a little bit harder for him to fight. You know, he's not as mobile anymore. So the fact that this show takes the time to set that up, I think is good and earned. Um, of course, the Tuscans take Boba. Well, first the Jawas take his armor, which of course leads to why Cobb Vanth has the Boba Fett armor. So we're getting some pieces from Mando and stuff, which I like. And the Tuscans take Boba, and he's held their prisoner. Then he wakes up. And we get Boba and Fennec on the throne. I love, love, love Fennec Shan. She is in my top 5 characters. If I have to be really, really choosy, which is really hard. I do want to talk about her and do a separate video on just Fennec and her entire story and what I know about her. Because I think it's just Ming Na Wen, who is one of my favorite actresses. But she balances out Boba Fett so well. And I think that's because Ming Na Wen and Tamora Morrison have such a great chemistry. And Fennec is very focused and ruthless and very serious, while Boba's kind of just like, hey, I'm the daimyo. That's how you say it. I'm the daimyo now for Mos Espa and somewhat Tatooine. You know, let's see how this goes. So I think it balances out both of their characters so well, and I love seeing Boba Fett in this position of a daimyo and Fennec as kind of his right hand. And it's not in like Fennec very much sees it as a risk, but she's also kind of there to watch Boba. And of course, we learn later in episodes of why she feels that way. But in episode 1, just seeing their chemistry together is so natural and something I really, really love. Boba learning to lead Mos Espa is kind of the big thing over the course. It kind of gets lost in there, but especially episode 1, Fennec tells him, Jabba was carried by 50 men, around, and he was paraded around, and they, it was this whole thing. And Boba's very much like, I can walk on my own 2 feet. I do not need slaves to position me to a place. I can do my own talking. I can defend myself. And Fennec thinks this, of course, is not a great way because it's what the people are used to. But Boba Fett is very forward thinking in the sense of, he says, okay, that's great that they did that back then, which he doesn't agree with, of course, but he wants to do his things his own way, which works out and it also doesn't. It definitely puts a hit on his back, but he even says later in the episode, Jabba ruled with fear, I will rule with respect. And I think Fennec respects that about him, even though she knows that it probably will get him killed. I do keep forgetting that it's New Republic time, because everything's kind of uplifting and happy in Mos Espa. There are a lot of people, especially when we go into Garsa Fwip's kind of safe haven. It's very happy, and you don't see the Imperial presence because it's the New Republic time, right? Battle of Jakku has happened, and this is a new era. So that is one of the things when I started watching Mando, and I was very early on. I mean, that was 2019. I really was not truly into the Star Wars fandom. I thought, okay, it takes place like during OT and all of that, like during the originals. This wouldn't have anything to do with the sequels. And then I don't know how I learned, but I was just like, oh, this takes place after the OT or after Return of the Jedi. The Empire isn't a thing anymore. And I think with this, like, it would have been really interesting to see the Empire, even the First Order, kind of influence with Boba Fett, and Boba Fett being like, "Nope, I'm not doing that." And I do hope for a season 2, but really this story is more focused on territories, I guess. You got the Tuscans, you got the Hutts, and then you got the Pikes as well. So I feel like it didn't go too much into the Empire and what that did. Of course, in later episodes, I know he talks about it a bit more. But seeing these people happy and not the Imperial control, of course, that Tatooine had is really interesting to me. And something that I think is good. It works well with the TV show. I just kind of wish I would have seen a little bit of that. Initial first fight with the assassins. This is where the show starts to either lose some people or become a show to where they definitely use the medium for this TV show, which if you don't know what the medium is, basically Lucasfilm has developed a is it a 360 screen? I don't know if it's a 360 screen, but basically it's technology that the actors are acting with a blue screen. It's actually great. Watch the documentary. I believe they talk about it in the Book of Boba Fett documentary and the Mando documentary. But in this one, it seemed like they were very much trying it out, kind of, for the first time. They used it a lot in Obi-Wan, and I don't think they used at all in Andor, or even the Acolyte. I think they used it in Ahsoka as well. But with Book of Boba Fett, it's very early on into them using the medium, and it's noticeable. It's really, really noticeable, especially when Fennec is climbing along the roofs of Mos Espa. It just, there's something about it that it just doesn't look lived in and real. No hate to the prop designers and to the CGI artists. Y'all's jobs are way too hard for me to handle. But it is a little bit noticeable, so it does take me out of the fight a little bit, as well as the fight does kind of overstay its welcome. Boba gets, like, hit in the first, like, minute, so then he's out of the fight and Fennec has to chase, which I love seeing my girl Fennec, don't get me wrong, but Boba, like, gets hit once and then he needs, like, the Bacta, and I'm like, oh, okay, he's gonna be struggling. So basically, Boba struggles to survive, bringing in the Bacta tank for a flashback time. I like how the Bacta tank is used. I like it. I don't like how often it's used, but I think for it to tell the story it needs to tell, it makes sense. A lot of people were wishing that the flashbacks were just its own show, that the show kind of had a bit more episodes. So I do wonder, we'll get into those later episodes if you know what I'm talking about, but I do wonder if the flashbacks with the Tuscans or that entire story was supposed to be one episode. And because of certain things coming in later episodes, they couldn't put that, so they needed to put a flashback. I don't think so. Again, I'm kind of making that up, but it does feel... I don't know if we need a flashback or 2 flashbacks every episode. Like, I feel like that's pushing it a little bit. And then, of course, they just stop the flashbacks as the episodes go on. So it almost feels like, okay, the flashbacks are only for, like, the first 3 episodes, and then we're moving on. So I like the flashbacks in this one. Boba defeats the monster and basically slowly earns the respect of the Tuscans. He tried to escape the first time, and he could have killed the little youngling Tuscan, but he didn't. So that was when the youngling started to kind of, like, see him and start to realize, like, oh, wow, you wouldn't just, like, kill us and stuff. Then, of course, he defeats a monster, saving the little kid, and he earns their respect. Now he tries to fight with them. They show him how to fight. And the Tuscans are characterized in a very, very, very well, in my opinion. I know there were a couple things, which we'll see in a later episodes that a lot of people did not agree with. And of course, I can not speak for the indigenous community in our Star Wars fandom, and I know that there were a lot of people that put it in better ways that have connections to that. But for me, kind of looking at it, I thought it was great. I thought it was really well done. I actually took 2 years of sign language, so I do know a little bit, and I loved how that was influenced. And that was a big thing with the Tuscans, and showing that deaf representation and that way, another way of describing, and just seeing that in my Star Wars is so freaking cool and really makes me feel more about the Tuscans and about Boba and his relationship with them. With the Tuscans, they're very much a hunter people, and we even see that a little bit more in episode 2, but they are traditional, but they earn respect. And I think with this clan, it's done well. It is really, really done well, and I'm quite surprised at how well it's put together. I've always been a fan of the Tuscans. I always thought mainly their design was really cool, and as you know, I'm huge into character design. So I always thought their designs were really unique and interesting. I read the Kenobi novel. It's not a novel. I read the Kenobi book, and in that book, they have a scene basically where there's a group of Tuscans, and Obi-Wan has to communicate with them and trying to save someone. No spoilers for that book, but he gets to learn a bit more about the Tuscans as well as us and realize that they're not that different from the people. And we see that so much in this TV show. And that makes me really happy that we get to glimpse into that. And it wasn't like the Tuscans like took Boba and like just started being nice to him and all of that. And that wouldn't have kind of worked for their characterization of who the Tuscans are. But after he proves himself, after he trains, after he protects their own, they start to respect him and put him part of the clan. And to me, that's something really special, and something special about Star Wars as well, in the sense of the found family and coming together. For episode 2 of Book of Boba Fett, before we start the episode, at the end of episode 1 and like all these different episodes, as well as Mando, I believe. I don't know if Ahsoka did this one. I think it did, maybe. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But I love how they show the concept art at the end of every episode. I am huge on concept art. I think they put a concept art book out for Book of Boba Fett. The only problem is they are so expensive. They're like $50 each for each concept art book. They just put out one for Arcane. They have one for... I have the Rise of Skywalker one. I really want the concept art book for Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka. They're putting one out for Outlaws as well. They're just amazing, but they're like $50 each. So... anyway, maybe I should start a Patreon. But I love the concept shown at the end credits. I just think it's super cool. Basically, the assassin, which is called the Night Wind. I think that was previously, already put into canon, but I don't know, they sound cool. Says that he was sent by the mayor. Basically, he was not. He was supposed to kind of pose it on the mayor, and Boba kind of comes to realize that. Even though he doesn't trust the mayor, I think that, in the end, we know what happens, but Boba definitely, there's a lot of people out for Boba, and especially with this, the Night Wind, I guess, are not allowed in Hutt space, so then after Boba killed him, technically the mayor killed him, Boba didn't want him to die and everything, and I think he this is the point where he slowly starts to realize, like, oh shoot, like, I really need to cover myself. And the mayor says running a family is more complicated than bounty hunting. And I love this because someone did an edit of the show that was like Full House with Black Chrysanthemum, Fennec Shang, Boba, the Gamorrean guards. And like, it is true that Boba, oh, and the mods, Boba's really creating a family. And I don't know, like, writers, like, let's get on this. I feel like this could be a really fun family. Like, Boba's the dad, Fennec's the mom, Black Chrysanthemum is like the older brother, the Gamorreans are the two younger brothers, the mods are like their little kids. Dude, they could totally run with it. And Grogu's like their young cousin, like the young baby cousin, or I don't know, Boba Fett could be a godfather. Anyway, you know what I mean? Like, this show, you start to realize how family oriented it is and how Boba is really creating a family within Mos Espa. And that's even more kind of shows with the mods as well. And they kind of look up to him in that way. I love this show so much. I don't understand why people don't. Max Rebo lives. That was great. Not for long, but he lives. The twins. Yeah. I mean, I think it has a little bit more payoff in later episodes, but it also doesn't. Like, it was cool to see the twins. I think that reinforced, like, yeah, that's right. Okay, Jabba the Hutt. Like, we're in Hutt space. There's also the Pikes as well. Like, what? Who does what? Them kind of showing off Black Chrysanthemum. I think that's cool. I love Black Chrysanthemum. I think he's a really cool character. I know he was cooler in the comics as well. There's not much I knew about him from the comics, but I like him. I like him here. We get more flashbacks. Boba training with Tuskens. The younglings are watching. We get to see the Pike Sand Train, which I always thought that this was pretty freaking cool. It's kind of weird that we haven't seen it anywhere else in canon. I could be wrong about that. Again, I haven't read many comics, but I love the Pikes. I love anytime they come online. I don't like that they killed Tusken Raiders. That's a big no-no from me, but I do think it's pretty freaking cool. I liked how the Tuskens had a burial ceremony. And that was, I think, the point that Boba was, like, angry. Like, you could see that he, like, this was not right, and he wanted to protect his people. And, of course, this is just a way of life for the Tuskens, but he wanted to do something. So he went and basically beat up a whole bunch of pirates, got some speeders. He got to train the Tuskens like a bantha. That's where that meme came from, and I loved that. And just seeing Boba work now, him training the Tuskens, it's just a full circle thing of amazingness. And I love it. I liked how there was this Tusken trying to jump on to Boba's speeder, like from another speeder, and he kept failing. And you would see that after the time. And I liked that just small little detail of that's what they're training for. And it did take a little bit of time because we really hadn't seen Tuskens on speeders. Later in the episode, the leader of the Tuskens says, "This is what we do. We hide." And Boba says, "You do not have to hide." And the leader says that the outsiders have machines, and Boba says, "And now you do as well." So Boba helping out the Tuskens, honestly, love it. It's the best. Basically, they stop the train, talks about it with the Pikes. The Pikes are pushing spice, which I do, that, of course, develops later into the show. And basically, Boba says, hey, the Dune Sea is the Tuskens' ancestral claim. They own this. So every time you pass through here, you need to pay them. And I just thought that was super freaking cool. Um, I don't know other people's thoughts on this. Again, like, not that it's a sensitive topic, but there's not much research that I did when talking about this. If they were respectful in portraying that type of thing, I thought it was respectful. Again, comment down below if you know. But I thought it was done really well, and how the leader is almost shocked that Boba was able to do that and to change the ways. So, again, everything about the Tuskens in the show, besides a thing we'll get into a couple episodes, um, is done really, really well. The lizard thing is weird. It's weird, I get it. It's like a good weird Star Wars though. And I I love the Night Sisters. I love the Tuskens. We got the Great Mother, or not the Great Mothers. The mothers from the witchy coven in Acolyte. I like when Star Wars is weird. I like when Star Wars does spooky, scary, magic things, but they are part of kind of a religion. I like when it does that because it's the same thing with the Force. It's just the Force is a lot more normalized than these things, so I like it. The lizard thing is weird, but I mean, hey, it is what it is. I like the flashes of the water with the tree and how that symbolized Camino. The tree was able to give him like his new staff. Well, technically he was going to make his new staff, but that's where he got the tree bark from. It was really cool, honestly, and how he felt trapped, which was like the Sarlacc, but that kind of related more to his life when he, was an OG bounty hunter for the Empire. So I thought it was really, really cool. And Boba officially gets accepted in the tribe, gets really, really cool wraps, looks freaking sick, and gets to make his staff. Now, I do believe this is because he comes from Maori descent and has directly and also indirectly uplifted his tribes in a way that you look at conventions, he will happily do I believe it's pronounced the haka, and he will talk about why lifting up his tribe and indigenous peoples is so important. And with this TV show, I feel like that was done and referenced really well and felt very organic with the Tuskens. And Star Wars is such a big universe that it's been shocking to not see much of the Tuskens, and I think they were just waiting for the right moment to make it right and to make it perfect. I get chills, honestly, thinking about the end of episode 2 of where Boba comes back with his staff, shows it to everyone, and they start this ceremonial dance with the staffs. And one by one, each of them join in around the fire. And it's beautiful. You have the music as well that just accompanies it very reverently and softly, but then it starts to kind of get more as you continue on. And it is really freaking good. Just everything about it makes me really happy that we have this show. And I don't know, it's just great. And it makes it even more heart-wrenching of what comes in later episodes, but it's done well. So, in my opinion. So, yeah, and now let's talk about episode 3. All right, so episode 3, a lot happens. So much happens. Boba is really learning kind of how many allies he needs to make within Mos Espa, especially when this rando guy just comes in and just says, "No one respects you." It's actually really funny, and I like how it's delivered. Basically, tells him that There's the street gang that are half machine, half man, which I think is really cool. And basically says, well, if you do that for me, I'll help you. Anyway, he's kind of like making it up, but I also do think it brings up an interesting point of like Boba does need to kind of like step up his game and stuff to compete with the Pikes and with the Hutts. And don't believe Crimson Dawn is mentioned in this show. That's right, because Crimson Dawn is disbanded. But I still think it's really, really interesting. He meets up with the mods. It's kind of what I call them. I don't know if that's their official name, but basically they think of Boba as a crime boss, just as someone who kind of killed his way to the throne and isn't really going to do anything. And they complain about the prices of things. That's why they steal and say they don't have any job. And Boba just says, I'm going to hire you. And everyone's like, even Fennec's like, what are we doing? Boba literally just adopted like 6 kids. And I love that for him. He truly is starting a family. And there's like the scene of Boba removing his helmet, and then he says, will work for me. And it's almost as if Boba is removing like the layer of him being just a crime boss to him being an actual person and wanting to make that journey. We get a Camino flashback with young Boba watching his father leave. People, for some reason, were mad at this flashback. Everyone thought we were going to get more Camino. Y'all know me. I'm not a big prequels fan. It is what it is. I think the story's fine, and overall, like, I think there are really, really good redeeming qualities of them. But it does kind of piss me off when every single TV show has to have a prequels reference. Like, let's move on, okay? I'm so done with prequels. Let's get some sequel references. It's so weird because when the sequels are referenced, people like whine and complain and are just like whatever. And then when the prequels are referenced so many times, but not like as much as they want it to be, they lose their damn minds. That's a Star Wars fandom for you. But I thought it was fine. I really don't care about young Boba Fett's life. We saw some of that in the Clone Wars. We saw some of it in the comics as well. I don't need to rehash that. I am more focused on who Boba Fett is now. After the Empire, after his bounty hunting days, I want to know who he is. So I really didn't need to spend that much time on Camino. He leaves the Tuskens to basically talk with the Pikes. And, because of course the Tuskens own the Dune Sea. So he wants to make sure they get their deal, which is important. When he's arriving, I don't know if it's Mos Espa, it might be, but he's arriving into this town and he sees the stormtrooper helmets with the spikes through them, which of course we saw in Mandalorian season 1, which is really freaking cool. And I think that's when he realizes, oh, the Empire's defeated. Like, there's not a whole bunch of Imperial stuff. Because you remember, I mean, Boba has been in that Sarlacc pit before the Battle of Endor. So he was very much, probably still thinking that the Empire was still around. And because he was just with the Tuskens, that might have just isolated him a little bit. But I think that's the moment he realizes that the Empire is gone. For now, at least. He comes to collect payment, but basically, I guess the Raiders already laid claim. This is where a lot of people had issues, which I don't know if I have an issue with it. It's more about ethics, but Boba comes back to a dead tribe. And this is where a lot of people had issues because they didn't agree with the killing of, indigenous peoples to push a story along. There were better ways to do that. I personally agree. I feel like his tribe could have survived. There didn't really need to be this big push for Boba's revenge, which we really don't see where he is now. I know I'm skipping ahead a couple episodes, but of course when he kind of flies in and gets all the raiders, not to say it doesn't pay off, but it feels like unnecessary violence. I personally, killing off character or characters to push a character story along, I don't hate. I bring up Kylo Ren in The Rise of Skywalker. When Leia dies, she sacrificed herself for Kylo. Now, of course, that has a lot to do with our beautiful Princess Carrie Fisher's death and her not recording scenes for that movie. So I do feel like her death was earned and was very respectful in a way that it needed to be, of saving her son. But of course she did die. She did sacrifice herself, right? And Star Wars is all about that sacrifice. Rogue One, very much, you're killing off a whole bunch of characters so Leia, Luke, and Han can go save the day in A New Hope. I think where people were not happy with this was because of how much they had kind of connected with this group, and it their deaths just kind of happened, and then we kind of move on. Boba Fett now has a motive, but how strong is that motive, and did that motive really need to happen? If you wanted Boba to leave the Tuskens on a good note, I don't know if you needed to kill them. Personally, me, again, I don't know much about the community in that aspect. So again, if you know, please let me down in the comments. I'm always open to learning, but I just do remember people really, really being angry at how the Tuskens were handled in their deaths. So I get chills every time Boba walks in and sees all his dead clan. And then he, of course, does a ceremonial burial for the Tuskens. And the music that plays is just a very low, somber humming. And it gave me chills. I mean, I was kind of getting emotional just because of how these first 3 episodes, like, we spend a lot with the Tuskens, and especially that kid too. You start to think, okay, he probably didn't survive either. So that's really hard to kind of stomach, and especially how fast-paced this TV show is with a lot of damn information. You don't really feel the payoff of their death. So that's all I'm going to talk about it on that front, but I understand why people didn't like it, and I understand, at the end of the day, like, giving your character something to feel something about, a motivation, a character motivation doesn't always need to be death. It doesn't. And I wish writers and directors kind of knew that there's more to a character direction than revenge. But that's all I'll say on that front. He feels like he failed them, and that kind of leads him on. Black Chrysanthemum tries to kill Boba Fett. That was kind of cray-cray. And thankfully the mods come to his rescue. I love the role of the mods from this episode out. I know a lot of people don't like them, but they are just such a fun design and so cool characters. Black Chrysanthemum shows what a Wookiee character could be. And yeah, I'm going to bring up the Acolyte. I don't understand why Black Chrysanthemum feels so expressive, so much of a character, to where Kelnaka does not. Kelnaka doesn't really feel like a character I should care about, or his actions I should care about. Now, y'all know I read the comic, and I loved the comic, and I loved his character in that comic. But when thinking about the TV show, his character was so underwhelming, and I hate to say that because I love Junus and I love everything he did and how much time and effort he put into that character and the choreography in that Wookiee suit. I just don't understand why Black Chrysanthemum just hits differently for me. Maybe because he is not just a one-dimensional Jedi. He is a fighter. He definitely has some beef with Transoceans. You know, he respects Boba, but he also will take any job that money can buy him. And with Kelnaka, he doesn't feel lived in. And Black Chrysanthemum feels lived in. It feels like he's gone through a couple tumbles. So it made me realize rewatching the show how, especially with the new Disney TV shows that have come after Mando season 3, Ahsoka, Andor, and The Acolyte, just how much we kind of had it good with the Book of Boba Fett. And of course, people completely ratted on it. And I honestly, with the direction that Disney's going right now, I don't think we're going to get a second season because they probably won't see it as profitable. But it makes me so happy that we have it because Black Chrysanthemum, I just connect with his expressions, his growl, his freaking armor, the braids are so cool, and I just love everything about it. They end up beating Black Chrysanthemum, trapping him there. Fennec eating at the dining table with her feet up. She is so into this life, and Boba's just like, I'm trying to lead, and Fennec's just like, I don't know, just kill all of them. Like, let's just go. But she does it in such like a subtle way. I think it's really well done. The twins bring the gift of the Rancor. They do admit that they, released Black Chrysanthemum on him, but then they mention that they were lied to as well, and that actually the mayor promised someone, later we know the Pikes, this territory, which makes so much sense. I love Outlaws. Again, if you haven't seen that video, go watch that video. And I just feel like I understand so much more about syndicates and how they work with that game. So thank you, Outlaws. You've really done me a huge service in understanding how Star Wars works. But when it comes to the twins, they gift him a Rancor. Of course, Danny Trejo as the Rancor keeper is amazing. I love him. That's just such a funny kind of insert for a character, but honestly, it fits, dude. It is one of those gulp shittos that I kind of wish people clamored more to. Maybe because it is Danny Trejo, and it's just like, okay, he's a great actor as it is, but that Rancor keeper, dude, it's so cool. We get to spend like a good 5 minutes with the baby Rancor, and Danny Trejo explaining about the Rancor, and Boba is just like enraptured. He has seen, of course, the mighty Rancor that Jabba had tear people apart when he was there. We saw that in Return of the Jedi. But now that he sees a baby one, he's like, oh my god, this is the best thing ever. And I think it's super, super cool. Danny Trejo, I'm just going to call him that, mentions the witches of Dathomir rode Rancors. Excuse me? I'm sorry? What is happening? I did not know that. I didn't know that was canon. Why did more people not talk about that? Oh my gosh, y'all. I feel like the show just came and went, and we didn't really talk about the show. Again, we took the show for granted. We really did, and it deserved so much better than it got from the fans, because there is so much fan service smashed into the show that, I mean, I guess if you don't like fan service, then it would make sense. But dude, honestly, come on, like, it's so good. I love the mods and their hopped up speeders and how they're just kind of like Boba Fett's gang. The speeder chase, I'm not going to talk too much about it. Everyone was so mad at the speeder chase, and I don't know why. it's not great, but it's also not bad. It's almost on the verge of slapstick, especially with the one guy kind of bumping into everything, and it just feels so much like George Lucas and what the prequels were that I love it, and it's my favorite thing ever. So, and it's like a laugh was at the edge of my throat. Like I was about to laugh, but of course I wasn't. It just it was fun. Again with the like with the speeder chase and then the first fight that we saw in episode 1, it's kind of just like there. I don't know if it needs to be there, but I'm not angry that it is. It doesn't really slow down the story in a sense, but it's kind of just fun to have. Um and then of course we find out the mayor is working with the Pikes. I was not surprised about this in the slightest. I kind of knew it was the Pikes even in my first viewing. I'm just happy that we get more of them because they're the best. They're my babes. So yeah, overall episode 3 was great, and yeah, this review is gonna be long. If you couldn't already tell, if you're still here, love you. But let's go ahead and get on to episode 4. So with episode 4, this is where the pacing of the show starts to fall apart. And basically, this entire episode is a flashback, which I like. And this is how I think the show should have been entirely. Not just flashbacks, but how the episodes are. It shouldn't be like, oh, nowadays, and then go back to flashback. So this episode was just all flashback. And basically, we're looking into Jabba's palace. Boba, of course, wants to find his ship or get back his ship from Bib Fortuna, and he of course can't do it alone. And I love how the Mandalorian whistle is used in this show, but specifically this episode, and how it alludes to kind of what happened in Mando. I totally forgot that Mando fought Fennec Shan in season 1 or 2, whichever one that was. It might have been 2. And I completely forgot about that. So, of course, Boba finds Fennec, and it actually ties in really well and takes her to a modding station. I love the mods. I love everything about modding. It's not just General Grievous to where it's like, oh, okay, well, it's just all made of machine. It's that subhuman of machine and still human parts. It's just really freaking cool, and I love how the people there that are modders are characterized. When Boba walks in, they say, aren't you a little old to be here? So it's kind of like the new, younger crowd that, didn't really grow up with the Empire being too much of an occupation in where they live. So they're, taking new things to new heights, and I love that. I love everything about it. I wish it was definitely more normalized. It has that Robert Rodriguez style to it, especially when the modders are helping Fennec stay alive, and they're basically replacing her stomach with a whole bunch of electronics. It just, how it flows, it has that Rodriguez vibe, and I love it. It just seems super fun and punky. We know she's gonna survive, so like, why do we need to have this serious kind of reaction to her getting these mechanical parts? And then my favorite part too is how Boba asks, are you going to close her up? Are you going to cover her up? And the mod says, and cover all that beautiful work? Absolutely not. And I do think it's freaking cool. I would love some augmentations done. Boba basically tries to connect with Fennec. Fennec's like, what the hell just happened? I thought I was dead. And Boba's like, well, you're not. I saved you. And it kind of reminds me of like a life debt, kind of what the Wookiees have, to where she feels like she does kind of need to owe him. And she doesn't even believe that he's Boba Fett when he introduces himself. But I think after the fact, he kind of convinces her that, okay, wow, this actually is Boba Fett. So she does agree to help him get his gunship, but then after that, she will be free. Boba saying goodbye to the bantha that he like was with and made the ride actually made me tear up. Tamar Morrison is just, again, I've said it in these past episodes, but he brings out this subtlety into his character of caring for inanimate objects, caring for animals specifically that we know are not real, like the Rancor and the Bantha. And, how he just says the little line of, go make baby Banthas. Like, oh, Boba Fett, I love you. Like, he just. How he says it too is just so sweet, and it makes me really sad of saying goodbye to the bantha, but just that little moment of Boba taking the time to even say that, it just makes me so happy that we're not rushing through those little small moments of seeing Boba Fett more humanized. And again, I feel like people miss that. I feel like when people were talking about the show, they were like, well, it did nothing for Boba's character, like, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, you can't look at, like, what he says to Fennec or Mando or all of that with the Hutts or the Pikes. Like, it's more about his character and how he reacts with the Tuscans, how he reacts with the Rancor, the Bantha, how he reacts to, Fortuna on the throne. It's a subtlety in his character that a lot of people unfortunately missed. And I love going back now and being like, yeah, no, this was the character development that he needed and that we got, and people just kind of forgot. He says he will retrieve his armor and then take the throne when Fennec asks him what's up. He just wants a simple life, just a simple man making his way through the galaxy. And Fennec basically says people like us don't get to decide when we're finished. She has always been, in the type of work of the bounty hunting. And I mean, we especially see that in the Clone Wars and mainly the Bad Batch. So for me, her character, like, which is why I like it so much, is because she's so she knows she can't really trust anyone. She's been doing this on her own for a long time. And that makes it even more satisfying when without some, troubles along the way, they do end up getting Boba's ship. And Fennec making, like, the shot at the end to get the ship out of the hangar, and she just kind of smirks. Oh my gosh. You could see how much fun she's had now with another partner and kind of being loyal to someone else, which again is kind of talked about a bit more when after Boba thinking that his armor was still in the Sarlacc, maybe he doesn't remember having it on, or that the Jawas took it. That had to have been it, because of course he didn't find it. But the frickin' Sarlacc was so scary of them kind of flying into it. And I love doing the seismic charge right down into that Sarlacc and just exploding it. It was so satisfying and so freaking cool. Fennec, like, taking care of Boba as well, very subtly after that. He goes down into the Sarlacc and searches for his armor, doesn't, find it. He's burning, right? Because the whole thing is the inside of a Sarlacc is you basically a boiled line, decomposed for 1,000 years. Yeah. And when he comes out, of course, he's burning and, his skin is all grazed, and she pours water on his head and says, we need to get you to a back to tank and stuff. And very softly, not very Fennec-like, very much like she cares for him, and I'm here for it. That is my mom and dad right there. I love them. And Boba basically explains, I'm tired of dying because of the idiocy of others, which again leads to, I remember watching that for the first time and thinking, that's freaking Vader and the Emperor, or the Empire, and Boba says, think of how many lives we could have saved, how many people didn't have to die, and how many credits could have been made if we didn't kill those people. And, Fennec does agree with him, to the point to where Fennec does say that the Tuscans made him soft. And I love when Boba just looks at her and says, "The Tuscans made me strong." Uh, and you wouldn't expect that for a character like Boba Fett, right? And again, people that feel so strongly for Boba Fett and his character for the original trilogy and say that Disney ruined it. What character? What character did we have for Boba Fett? Literally, he got killed by Han on accident. Han literally was blind, backed up to a backed up into him, set his jetpack ablaze, and he fell into the Sarlacc. Like, that's your Boba Fett. Okay, okay. Of course, you have Clone Wars Boba Fett, but he was a child. That's you. No, that is such a different Boba Fett than the Boba Fett that we have now. Which, as you should not still be acting like your child self. Please God. And I didn't like young Boba Fett. I will still go down to this day. I really did not like him. Uh, how he acted. I get it. He was a child. I mean, he had a lot of trauma as well, but he just kind of acted like a whiny baby, and I didn't really care for it. I like this Boba Fett. Boba being shown killing Bib Fortuna. And then Boba gets completely healed. So I guess the whole Bacta thing, we're done with flashbacks, basically. Which when you're first watching the show, you're like, oh, no more flashbacks? Well, then how are we going to continue the story? And then, of course, you get episode 5, and then 6, and then 7. You ended after 7. And you're like, oh, that's why we don't see any more of Boba Fett. So it's great that he gets completely healed, though. Black Chrysanthemum gets, like, totally wasted and completely tears up a Trandoshan, or Trandoshans. Garza Flip tries. She's just such a done queen, and I feel for her, honestly. The whole "hit it, Max" is an iconic line, and I love everything about it. Basically, Boba's really, really trying to create allies, especially with Black Chrysanthemum. He brings the entire Tatooine families from Mos Espa, or the Mos Espa families, to his table, and basically wants to outlaw spice because he sees what it does to people, which is totally fair. That's kind of been a thing in the Star Wars world, to where spice isn't that respected, but it gets a lot of people money. Basically, it's our drugs, right? So, him trying to outlaw spice, like, that's not going to do good for the Pikes, because that's their whole kind of business. But, basically, they agree with him in the end. Fennec doesn't really trust them. Boba doesn't trust them as well. And we'll see kind of how that later develops. And Boba needs a team, right? He's got the mods, he's got Black Chrysanthemum, maybe, he's kind of got the community's word, but not that many people. He's got Fennec, but, he needs a bit more muscle. And Fennec, says, well, do we have enough credits? And Boba says, absolutely. And Fennec says, well, we can hire muscle. And then you hear the Mandalorian theme, and then it goes to black, and you're like, oh man, oh yeah. So, of course, what that follows is not good for the Book of Boba Fett. We get Mandalorian season 2.5, but if we're talking about this episode, I do think that Mando's theme is used in a really cool way as foreshadowing, with mainly Fennec, and then with the ending. Like, the ending, it still kind of gives you chills in the fact of, like, oh, you're gonna see Mando. So, overall, episode 4 is, like, really, really good. It really starts to show how this show's pacing is kind of a disaster. And then, of course, again, I'm thinking about episode 5 and 6 and how we're really kind of done with Boba Fett's story, if I remember correctly. So, yeah. Anyway, episode 4 is great. Let's talk about episode 5. Episode 5 is the absolute worst episode in Book of Boba Fett, but it is the best episode of a Mandalorian centered character arc. It is so good that I hate it so much because it's in Book of Boba Fett. You don't even get to see Boba Fett in this. You do get to see Fennec at the end, which whatever, that's okay. All of it is Mando, and it is so good, and it makes me kind of miss Mando 1 and 2. I love season 3, by the way, but it just has that feel, that Mando feel. And just like as I'm watching this, I just can't get out of my mind, oh, this is a Boba Fett show. Why are we having a whole episode dedicated to Boba Fett? And I think if we didn't have next episode and we went back to Boba Fett, I think it would be okay, but we really don't. Of course, we're going to see Mando meeting up with Grogu, but we get to see the armor, Paz Vizsla, who's one of my favorite characters as well. Of course, Mando's working with the Darksaber, and you really get to see his early developments with the Darksaber. How he doesn't feel confident, how it's like really heavy, and even Sabine kind of fought with this herself when, of course, wielding the Darksaber with Kanan, and, soon she learned. But it was really interesting to see Mando, and of course he removed his helmet at the end of season 3, so he has to atone. But he wants to get back to Grogu, and of course makes him the little armor. But Mando kind of going back to his roots and, kind of bringing in a bounty and stuff is just so satisfying. I kind of missed, just him doing those types of jobs, and I do hope we get to see that in season 4? Maybe season 4. I know it probably wouldn't be in the movie because movie's going to be a culmination of things, but hopefully maybe Mando season 4. So we get to see that. We get to see our first look at Night of 1,000 Tears, which, again, is crazy that it's in a Boba Fett show. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. Mando bringing in the bounties, doesn't really want to continue jobs. He wants to really get back to Grogu, but of course needs money and information. He goes to Peli Motto, who is one of my favorite characters in the Mandoverse. I have a Funko Pop of her holding little Grogu, and she's just amazing in this episode, and that makes me love this episode so much. Just hate that it's in Boba Fett again. Her overall just presence, her talking with the Jawas, with the droids. We get to see our first look at a BD droid, which I thought was great for those Jedi Survivor fans. Or Jedi Fallen Order, God. And just her whole relationship with Mando is so special and unique. The N1 Naboo Starfighter was super cool. I think all of us do miss the Razor Crest, and I think we can all kind of sympathize with Mando on this one. But I like the N1 Naboo Starfighter. And I liked how this episode took the time to have Mando really build it and work with Peli. Again, I hate it because it's part of a Boba Fett show, but if this was part of Mando season 3, oh my god, people would be saying, dude, this is like the best, this is so good. I don't understand why you had to put it in Book of Boba Fett. I remember when this episode came out, and especially next episode, people are going to be like, well, wait, how does Mando get an N1, or why is Mando flying an N1 Naboo Starfighter? Why is Grogu back with Mando? And it's like, oh no, you need to watch this show to understand that. And Star Wars was being really, really good about that, to where you really didn't need to know what was going on. and like with the TV shows and stuff, or with the shorts or the books. And now you kind of do, which is unfortunate. I think, I mean, I don't mind it because I don't mind watching these TV shows, but I mean, look at how long this review is right now, and I still have 2 more episodes to go. Like, don't even. It takes hours out of my day to rewatch and remember what happened. And I'm glad I did, because I didn't remember half the stuff that was in this, but it takes a lot of time, and it's unfortunate that Boba Fett's show really got stolen by this. I don't know why Mando season 3 couldn't have like 2 more episodes at the beginning with Mando coming back with Grogu. Um, I don't understand. I don't get it, and I want to know why they made this decision. Was Book of Boba Fett just not marketable enough, which I find hard to believe. Boba Fett as a character is very marketable, and I feel like Lucasfilm and Disney should know that. Um, yeah, it just, to me, it really doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So, overall, I think this episode was good. We know he's gonna go find Grogu before he helps Boba. But again, this episode's just it's such a discredit to it in the sense of it's part of Boba Fett. It would have been probably one of my favorite episodes if it aired in Mando season 3. But I just didn't, and I really want to know the reason behind that. Of course, I'm so interested in the industry and how certain decisions are made, but this one I haven't seen anyone talk about or really discuss with the knowledge that I trust, of why they made this decision. But overall, again, one of my favorite episodes, but also one of my least favorite just because it is a Book of Boba Fett show. So that's that one. Let's get on to probably the worst episode, episode 6. Oh boy. So this episode I have so many problems with it, but none of them are about Cobb Vanth. That is all I will say, which is who I will talk about first, and then we'll get into all the bad stuff. Cobb Vanth, baby, I missed you so much. Like, I am so glad that he was back. Seeing him, just also how he doesn't want spice in his territories and how he very much views the Pikes makes me really, really happy. And I was happy with just everything on that front. We do actually get to see Boba and Fennec. Oh my gosh. We actually get to see them in their own show. That's crazy. And basically, the next episode is going to be the finale, right? It's going to be the all-out war. And Mando, they need a little bit more, like, just firepower and muscle. So he goes to Cobb Vanth to ask for the people of Mos Pelgo. And it is, I'm sorry, their interaction is so gay. And I love it so much. I am a huge Cobb Vanth Mando shipper. That was, yeah. I'm trying to think if they met. No, it was season 1. And it's so good. I mean, literally, Mando offers to buy him a drink, and it's very flirtatious. Cobb Vanth is looking at his starfighter. I'm sorry. It's very flirtatious, and I love it. And, basically, the people of Freetown, it's not even Mos Pelgo anymore, view it as a city affair, something that they shouldn't get, be a part of, which is fair. But I do also think that Cobb knows that it will soon come to them. So, Mando leaves him with that. Then I'm going to just skip towards the end. We get to see Cad Bane, which I think was great. I think overall his design with this show was done really well. It's hard to transfer animation into live action, and I think how they handled Cad Bane was well done, and I think overall the design of him was pretty cohesive with what we saw in Clone Wars. So it was great to see him. I panicked when Cobb Vanth got shot. And I remember watching that for the first time and being like, oh, hell no. There's no way. But of course, he does survive. So I do want to see him in the Mando and Grogu movie, or have him get his own show. I think that would be really interesting. But he's alive. So we have to see him in another installment. And I want some payoff or something akin to that. Now, let's talk about the worst thing about this episode, the worst thing about this entire show, which is going to be the Luke and Ahsoka and Grogu mess that they have. Now, I remember watching this episode and honestly not being too jarred by the CGI Luke. I remember it was like, okay. I think I was still in shock of like just, oh my god, it's Luke Skywalker. I can't believe he's here. And oh my god, it's Ahsoka. Oh my god, they're talking. Rewatching this episode and kind of listening to other people's opinions on it, I do start to see where the faults lie. How he speaks is very just monotone, and there's not much emotion that comes from that. And in reality, that's not anything to do with the actor, the voice actors, because I know Mark Hamill came and kind of directed them. I don't know if it's just the CG voice that they kind of did, the layover. It just, it didn't really work for Luke. I think it worked better with Tarkin and Leia, because Leia, all she says is hope. And, she says it with a very light tone, and that's very much Leia. With Tarkin, Tarkin's an Imperial, so they all kind of sound the same. He's giving orders or speaking. So there's only kind of one tone that you need for that, so it wasn't a big deal. But with Luke, Luke is very expressive, especially in, not so much in Return of the Jedi, but I'm mainly comparing it to the Battlefront 2 cutscene with Luke, and, how just when he says, well, because you've asked. Like that, there's just such a fluid motion in that voice that makes him seem very caring and loving. In this, I didn't really see that. Again, I think it was more for the CGI voice and nothing to do with the actor. But, because you listen to what Luke is saying and you're like, okay, if he said that in a little bit of a lighter tone, I don't know if it would have been as aggressive. But everything that he does with Grogu, you're right. Grogu feels like he doesn't really want to be there. And Luke is trying his best, but also, again, I think it's the voice. There's not much more to give Luke on this one. He's just okay. I did not like Ahsoka and Mando and their whole interaction in this. Surprisingly, I love Ahsoka as a character. Ahsoka, I understand why people did not like Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka, mainly because in this episode, she's more of like a antagonist, trying to get Mando away from Grogu, which I don't think she perceived it that way, but that's what I read it as. And people were like, oh my gosh, she's just so depressed and so monotone. But then we get more information in Ahsoka as to why she's that. And, it's a lot of more trauma processing that she has on her end. But with this, R2 takes Mando to Ahsoka. Like, what the hell, R2? And then Ahsoka, basically, she kind of manipulates Mando in the sense of Mando really wants to see his child. I don't blame him. But then she's like, well, are you doing this for you or are you doing this for Grogu? And Grogu needs to complete his training because, and he can't have any distractions or attachments. And it's like, what? Bro, what? This is supposed to be the new Jedi Order. Like, what are we doing? Like, Rey, my girl, please, 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 in your new Jedi Order, please have attachments. I swear. Like, there ain't no way. Or at least learn that you can have attachments. Because I'm really sick of this notion that the Jedi can't have attachments and that is what it is. This is why I don't really care for the Jedi. And I'm kind of so sick because it's the same story every time. And I'm just like, hey, there's got to be a different way of thinking with the Jedi and how all of that is going about. So I really wasn't a fan of how Ahsoka handled that, and I felt really bad for Mando and for Grogu because they didn't deserve that, like, at all. I feel like the whole reason why Grogu chooses to go back to Mando is just because he knows, like, this is not an environment that I would be happy in. And of course, to bring up my lovely Ben Solo, because I have to, this does concern me how Luke and also Ahsoka kind of believe this notion of like, well, you can't see him. Like, you have to focus on your training and that's, what you signed up for. And like, that concerns me that Luke kind of held the same notion with Ben Solo and the other Padawans to where it wasn't like a long summer camp. It was basically like the rest of their lives. So I think that does concern me when it comes to Ben Solo in that aspect and why so easily he got groomed by Snoke is because of this notion of maybe I don't okay, this is gonna be a far stretch, but maybe Luke kept Leia and Han from seeing Ben. Leia, I don't think so much because I think Leia would be like, F that, I'm gonna go see my son. Like, you're not gonna control me. But maybe she was so scared because of Ben's anger that she didn't want to make it worse. With Han, I feel like Han being the non-force sensitive would be like, I don't belong in this. Like, Ben wouldn't want to see me anyway. Like, I don't deserve him. And I feel like that's why Ben would go to the dark side. You know what I mean? So it's just, I'm really sick of this notion. And I do hope that I'm wrong and that when we see, Luke's full Jedi temple with Ben Solo and Ty and all the other Padawans, I hope I'm stood corrected. Like, I hope I'm corrected on that notion because it doesn't look good for you, Luke. You are not in the clear. So overall, this episode just was not it for me. For some reason, I really liked it on my first watch. I think it was more shock, if anything. And on my second rewatch, I'm kind of just like, yeah, no, it's not for me. I think when Luke and Ahsoka were talking and she said you were so much like your father, like, I appreciated that little set, but I was just like, why is this in a Book of Boba Fett show? Get me out of here. Like, please show me back Cobb Vanth and Boba Fett and Fennec. Like, I want to go home. So, yeah, this episode, I don't think this show could come back from. I think the ending was really in the sense of Robert Rodriguez kind of just had to make a really cool finale, which, again, I actually like the finale of Book of Boba Fett, but yikes, bro. This episode really just put it back, and I think people were like, okay, like, well, we have one more episode, so we got what we needed from Luke and all that. So anyway, let's finish it off with episode 7. All right, so episode 7, I think, is just a culmination of everything kind of coming together and ending. There's a lot of action in this episode, which, I mean, that's what Robert Rodriguez kind of does. He's very much action oriented and kind of does that type of thing. So there really wasn't much story going off of this. I liked the confrontation between Boba and Cad Bane. I feel like it was good. It was deserved. I'm okay with Cad Bane dying. It's totally fine. The robot things were really, really cool. I keep wanting to call them droidicas, and I know they're not droidicas, so I will not call them that. But they were really cool. I love everything that was handled about the Pikes in this last episode, as well as we knew that the other families were going to turn on Boba, so I like that they followed through with that. It made it a lot more of a bigger threat. What else? Oh, Mando, Peli, and the coordinator, the Twi'lek. I totally ship them. This show gave us so many different ships. I'm here for it. Grogu reuniting with Mando, I think, was really, really sweet. Mando fighting alongside Boba as well. I feel like that was really cool, and hopefully because Mando's, helped Boba in this one and Grogu helped stop the Rancor, that Boba will come back in the Mando movie, which I'm thinking he will. I don't know why he wouldn't. For everything else, that's really where it is. They kill the Pikes, and they kill the leader of the Pikes, or Fennec does, and they leave, and Moss, Tatooine, it's all saved. So, overall, I think this episode was fine for what it was. I think, again, it was ending on a high note. A lot of action, and yeah, there's really not much else to say. I wish there was, but there really isn't. I forgot to mention for last episode how the cantina blew up with everyone in it, as well as Max Rebo and all of those lovely people. So this show is so interesting because I do think it's underrated. I think there's a lot of things that people miss that are good about it that people just don't want to talk about. And it's really frustrating because the show does have so many good things, but it also does not have some great things. I think the choreography, everything that Robert Rodriguez did, actually, I really don't mind. I think overall it was done well. I maybe would change a couple story beats, like the Tuscans dying, or for just Boba Fett, the Tuscans dying, or even kind of the stuff with the Pikes and Boba with the mods, or even Black Chrysanthemum, I felt like could have been done a little bit better, in the sense of if they were given more time, we could have really seen them start to become a family. I think the biggest issue with this TV show is the Mandalorian aspect of it. Not him coming to help Boba Fett. I think that is totally okay. It's the fact of he gets a dedicated 2 episodes, and I don't think that is fair. When you only have 7 episodes, there's not even a full 8 episodes, which, like The Acolyte or Ahsoka had. It's only 7, and I'm like, okay, guys, we could have done 1 more episode to really explore that. So it's frustrating because I know it could be great, and it is great. Just, I think it's really, really underrated, mainly because it gets weighed down by the things that aren't great about it. But overall, I love this TV show. It is my second favorite TV show entirely with Star Wars, and I just can't help but smile when Boba and Fennec are on screen, or even with some of the Mando and Paley and Grogu stuff. I love to see it, and it makes me love Star Wars even more. But if you've made it this far into an hour and a half review of my Book of Boba Fett, thank you all for staying with me. This honestly took so long for me to edit and for me to review. And yeah, I don't even remember what I even said about episode 1. But overall, I really like this TV show. If you enjoyed it, or if you didn't, let me know in the comments. I'd be really interested to see some of your opinions on the show. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening.